What's up, guys? We are back with another episode here. We are the Unqualified Filmbros talking about a video game adaptation into a movie presented by PlayStation. The movie, not this episode. We're talking Uncharted. So rather than just go into it with my usual, "What'd you guys think?" I'm gonna defer to Ben and Declan here as the two guys who have played the game. So Max, why don't you and I take a back seat here and let these guys go off?
I'll go on mute, George.
I'll join you.
Yeah, that sounds prety good. I would say overall, I did enjoy a lot of the movies, but as I was saying before we started, I really just couldn't take Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg as their characters. I mean, that's just like when you play the games and that's the source material, you have certain like characters in your mind, and Tom Holland, he just never looked old enough and acted old enough. And also the character never seemed right. Like, I mean, they changed a bit of the backstory, and the treasure they're obsessed with was not Magellan's. It was obviously Sir Francis Drake's treasure because they were descended from Drake's. That's a long story, but yeah, descended quotation marks. But you know, he just never captured the essence of the character. I mean, the biggest thing is like he wouldn't have to be asked twice to go find $5 billion worth of gold or whatever to famous Magellan's adventure. And then there was Mark Wahlberg as Sully, who just didn't quite fit. There was like an essence. Sully is supposed to be obviously a mentor character and sort of a father figure for Nathan, and he meets him pretty early on in the games. I think he gets like arrested or something when he was like a young teen. And so Sully, sort of acted as a father figure. So I thought it was weird that they sort of created some like drama, like needless drama. That Sully was going to double cross them, and then Chloe actually was sort of a double agent in some of the games, but she was normally friends with Nathan.
He sort of plays both sides.
Yeah. So on the character side, I didn't really feel like they got it. But on the other hand, I feel like they got a lot of the essence of like the adventure. And certainly like the set design and the action sequences felt very like reminiscent of the games. Very elaborate. A lot of like focus on these crazy contraptions, hiding treasure and stuff. I felt at some points like, oh yeah, I did that in the game. And of course, falling out of the airplane and stuff. You do that in like every single game, falling out of a train, falling out of an airplane. And of course, I don't know for you guys who haven't played the games, when he falls, out of the plane and like washes up on the beach, the guy who says, "Oh yeah, that happened to me," if you didn't gather, that was Nolan North, the voice of Nathan Drake.
I figured.
It was. It had the subtlety of a Stan Lee cameo, but in the best way possible. I mean that in the best way possible.
I feel like you wouldn't really know unless you played the games, or at least you had like some knowledge.
Like, I didn't pick up on that.
So I figured he had some connection to the franchise.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was, but you don't give
it's very specific.
You don't give someone a vocal cameo.
No.
You have fallen out of planes in the game. So he's completely right. Like, oh yeah, I've done that before.
Yeah.
No, I definitely enjoyed the moment. I would say it might honestly be my favorite moment in the movie. I won't lie. I think I was a bit. It was because I was a fan of these games that I was a bit disappointed by this film. I genuinely felt that an Uncharted movie could be like, so long as they got the main characters right, it would be, unless you had like so long as you get the main characters right, an Uncharted movie would be both good and live up to the game. But I just felt as though Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg just were miscast for their roles. Like, I mean, that's almost like, it's like, I was thinking about this kind of, I honestly feel like almost any major Hollywood leading man, including Joe Pesci. No, I'm kidding, not Joe Pesci.
Are you kidding me? Joe Pesci
Steal my
is
joke from
He's
before
retired
the
anyway.
episode.
Joe Pesci
I
is
said
the
that.
leading man.
I said
he
that
is-
before we started recording.
He
But,
is
like,
the leading man. Don't
man,
even joke about that, Declan.
you
I
know, you're
swear to
right.
God.
honestly,
I swear to God.
Come on, Declan.
I'm coming for you, man.
I made that joke.
no, but,
Joe
but
Pesci
no,
as
like,
Sully and Macaulay Culkin as Nathan Drake.
why would you claim that for yourself? That
It's
makes
brilliant.
it worse.
That's also a good question, Declan. That is
Yeah.
also a very good question. Why would you claim that, George? Why is that the hill that you're gonna die on?
Because I'm selfish. Haven't we established that in the last 20 episodes?
Anyway,
Because you go to
sure.
film school?
Did you know that?
You know
I
it would
go to
work.
film school.
I didn't know that.
But no, what I meant to say was, like, almost every leading man you could think of could probably do a pretty decent Nathan Drake. Obviously, it would have been great if we could have gotten Nathan Fillion from like 10 years ago to do it, but unfortunately, right now he's probably, we talked a lot about this, probably a bit too old, unfortunately. But he would have been the perfect cast for it. But I feel like even like Ryan Reynolds or Jake Gyllenhaal, I feel like they could have done a decent job at it. But Tom Holland playing Tom Holland, kind of, or well, not Tom Holland, playing Peter Parker, I just didn't.
They're one and the
feel
same.
like was
They
the
are.
right fit for Nathan Drake.
I got that too, Declan. I sort of got that sense, I don't know, like a third, maybe halfway through the film, where it's like, oh, he's kind of just playing the same character, except there's no alter ego, really.
No.
He's just kind of playing Peter Parker. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I just think that there's, there was room for him to make the character his own. And I think, obviously, I haven't played the game, so I don't know the dynamic between Nathan Drake and Sully. I don't know the dynamic between Nathan and Chloe, but I think even if he had done a not so faithful adaptation of the character and portrayal of the character that felt organic in his own, I think it probably would have made the film that much better. And
100%.
I was talking to George after I saw it, and I said, this was the perfect length of a film, right? It was just under 2 hours. It wasn't like a 2.5 hour slog fest where I was like, all right, when is this thing over? It was less than 2 hours. It was filled with action sequences that, filled most of the time. It was quippy and quick. And I think it was, for someone who hasn't played the game, it felt like a really strong way to introduce characters. And obviously I didn't have the background, so I didn't have the emotional connection, but it felt like it was a really great way to just enjoy the characters, enjoy the movie, enjoy the story, even if it wasn't necessarily the best out there. And I don't think they were trying to go for that. I think it was out there for entertainment value, and it absolutely entertained me. I'll go see a second one.
Max, to your point, I think an action adventure movie, globe trotting with Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland with Antonio Banderas as the villain, as a movie, as a concept, works. And I think we got that from this film. I think we saw maybe the leads didn't have as much chemistry as they could have. They were having fun, they were riffing a little bit, but I think it could have gone up another step. But I think you put these two guys together, you have a really strong, really charismatic antagonist for an action adventure movie. And I think that really worked. Like you said, it's very entertaining. In terms of the adaptation of the game, or the games rather, excuse me, I haven't played them, so I can't speak to whether it was a faithful adaptation of the story of the games, but I think at the root of it, this was an attempt of putting these guys in an action adventure, and they just happened to have that source material as what they were using for the story.
Yeah, I will say the only thing, I still don't understand why they changed the backstory. I mean, for a movie that is so centered around the Drakes, especially, the brothers, why would you change the treasure from Sir Francis Drake, who they were both obsessed with in the game and named themselves after, spoilers, to Magellan?
Yeah.
There's Magellan, I mean, there's lots of explorers.
Magellan is a very well-known explorer and globe circumnavigator in terms of the
That's true.
expedition.
So is
Not a
Sir
lot of people
Francis
know
Drake.
Sir Francis Drake. He's not as mainstream. I mean, we all know who he was and what he did, but I think Magellan is just
Well, yeah, but why
that
does that
rolls off the
matter?
tongue.
Well,
kind of.
I also want to add.
I don't think that
also
matters
wanna,
as much.
I also want to add in that, like, I think, Ben, to your point, it doesn't matter who it was, right? I mean, I think maybe in the video games it might matter more, but
I think the
for the
family
story,
connection would matter more in a movie than a video game.
I mean,
I think given how
yes,
much
but-
stress they put on the family and the brothers themselves, considering they are named Nathan Drake, and that ring is supposed to be a family heirloom in the Drake family, descended from Sir Francis Drake. I just don't get why they changed that. Like,
so
Max-
my
Max,
argument is basically just that I think it allows them to continue the franchise outside of like the personal connection, right? I think, obviously the Sir Francis Drake would have felt more weight on your shoulders in the audience. I think the characters would have made the movie maybe a little bit more cohesive, but it might have closed off the storyline a little bit more, right? Like, I think it allows them to sort of branch out into other sort of legendary tales of exploration and adventure that doesn't tie them to just their family name in the first movie. Because the way that they set it up at the end very clearly was like, okay, we don't care how well it does in the box office. We want to make it an open end so that there is the opportunity to make a second movie and franchise this. And I think they absolutely did
Max,
that.
I will
to
say,
your
to be
point-
fair, I have to make this point. The first
Go ahead.
game, the first game is Sir Francis Drake's Treasure.
Yeah.
And the third game is Sir Francis Drake's Treasure. And the fourth game exists. The fifth game exists, is like a prequel. So, I don't think it closes it off as much as you think it does. No different than, like, Indiana Jones and his obsession with the Ark, or his father's obsession with the last, or the what's it called, the
Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail.
Holy Grail.
The Last Crusade.
The Last Crusade.
He
So I
chose
feel like those personal
Holy.
connections make it, because otherwise you got plenty of treasure hunting tales. Like, otherwise it's just a cheap copy of Indiana Jones, technically. Without the characters, you're missing a lot of the story. And I think that's the part, like, I mean, you can adapt it any way you want, but I don't think it was unique in any way to the point that, like, why would you change it? If it's better, go for it. But it was not, in my opinion.
I think, to Max's point, starting off with Nathan Drake and finding his treasure, assuming they find his treasure at the end of the first movie, because the purpose of a blockbuster like this is
they
to
don't.
franchise.
You don't
So-
need to find it.
I'm just hypothetically, if they found Nathan Drake's treasure,
Yeah, I mean, in
That
terms
kinda
of, sorry,
or not-
George, in
sorry,
terms of,
Sir
in
Francis
terms
Drake's
of
treasure,
like
not Nathan
finding
Drake's
the
treasure.
actual treasure, they don't need to find it. But they
Right.
do in terms of money making capabilities.
But to find, and I'm sorry, I call it Nathan Drake's treasure, Sir Francis Drake's treasure. If they found their ancestors' treasure and they closed that family loop at the end of the first movie, it just feels like a cash grab to go after Magellan's in the next movie, or Cortez, or whomever. If you start out with Magellan, or you start out with another explorer, and you maybe do 2 or 3 movies where you're with other explorers, and then for a finale, you tie them all together with Sir Francis Drake.
Yeah, make
I think
3
as
movies.
a film series,
I agree, George. I agree.
as
Make
a
3
film
movies.
series, it
Make
makes
3
sense
movies.
to progress into the family.
They've already set up a second one, right? With his brother being alive in some prison somewhere.
And
you know, that allows them the space and the room to make like a series, to make more movies. And look, Ben, I get what you're saying about like it doesn't close them off. It doesn't make it so that they're unable to make another movie. But I think this just makes it easier, and I think it makes the logic and sort of the path between this movie and the next one, when it inevitably happens, because it will happen, it just makes it a little bit easier, and I think a little bit more palatable and probably more marketable. So it might not necessarily be the best storyline, but it makes the
or
most
it might
sense.
not be the most faithful to the game series.
No, but it makes a lot of sense when it comes
think
from
it's
a
faithful to the
marketing and a money standpoint. And obviously, I know George and I are coming from the perspective of, we frankly could not care less about the video game characters because we haven't played the video game characters, so we don't know their stories, we don't know their history,
We know them
their background,
as
we
movie
know
characters.
we know them from the movie, and from the movie, that is what makes the most sense for me. And I think, George, not to put words in your mouth, but I think that's probably where you're coming from too.
I have water in my mouth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know I do agree with you, Max.
I'll revise my statement in that I guess it's less about them going to search for Sir Francis Drake's treasure. I think the thing that upset me was that there's no mention of Sir Francis Drake in their backstory.
That's understandable.
Especially given that ring is Sir Francis Drake's ring. They actually steal it. And for some reason, they're obsessed with Magellan because that's the treasure they want to choose.
Yeah.
If they want to choose that treasure, that's fine. But I don't think you should change the backstory to them being obsessed about Magellan when they've named themselves after Sir Francis Drake. That's a big part of the games, is like this descendant, from, Sir Francis Drake. It's a really complicated storyline. They steal that ring, which they believe, sort of theirs. And he does that with his brother, with Sam. And so I feel like that obsession is what sort of puts them onto that like treasure hunting. And I think they missed the mark by having them obsessed with Magellan, because like you said, that also closes them off, because why in the world would they just be obsessed with Magellan? Where do they go from here? Because what they should have done, and to your point, is probably make them obsessed with Sir Francis Drake's treasure. But obviously Nathan Drake, like Indiana Jones, he's very smart. He knows all the history. And he can find any treasure. So Sully comes to him, brings him Magellan's treasure, and he's like, oh yes, of course. That would work fine, I think. But they're missing some like key parts of his backstory. Namely, like Sir Francis Drake is like, it's a big part of his motivation as a character. So I guess that's where I'm also coming from.
Yeah.
Just from the character motivations and development, I kind of felt like Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg's characters were like light versions of what they should be. You could see glimpses of it.
That's
They felt
understandable.
really
I think it was a mistake on the filmmaker's part to have the film be about Sully and Nate meeting, because that wasn't it was an important part of their dynamic, but in the games they met so much earlier in their lives, like even earlier than this. So it's kind of like just completely changing the dynamic, and I feel like the dynamic between the two is one of the most like that's a great source for filmmaking and all that, for like adaptation. And so it's kind of like they kind of gilded the lily somewhat by making it about how the two of them meet. I'm not saying
they really
Oh.
could have fixed this, like to your point, when like because in the games they do go and like get caught, breaking into something, and Sully rescues him. If my memory serves me correctly, it's been a while since I've played the games, but I remember like I think Sully rescues him from like the police essentially. You could have just done the same thing and have him be raised by Sully. Sam goes off and does his own thing or whatever. Sully raises Nathan because he doesn't want to go back to the nuns. There you go. And then you don't have this like weird. I just felt it was really unnecessary with everyone else double crossing and triple crossing. Why in the world do we need to worry about Sully? Come on, just relax. You gotta have one person, and I get it. Like, oh yeah, it's a cutthroat game, but it was a little much, especially for people familiar with the games. Where Sully is like a father figure. He would never do anything to like betray Nate. So,
Well, speaking of double crossers, I want to get into a couple more of the performances here in the film. What did you guys think of Sophia Ali as Chloe? First, from the perspective of those who have played the game and know the character.
I feel like she did a good job, but I feel like she never felt like Chloe. Again, the same thing I've been saying. I felt like she didn't feel that much like Chloe, the character in the game. Partially, again, because of Tom Holland, I feel like aged her down somewhat.
Yeah.
Like,
well, she was also playing the pity card a lot, which Chloe never did. I mean, yeah, she was like double aged, and she's always out for herself. But that's just what she expected from her. She would like save Nate if the going ever got tough. But it wasn't like this pity card where it's like, everyone's out, everyone's double crossed me. It's like, just say you're selfish. That's fine. That could be your character because that's kind of her character. She's got a good heart when it matters, but she's looking out for herself.
I'll also bring up, just because I think they never brought up Laura Fisher at all, except I think maybe
Elena.
I say Laura, that's weird. Sorry, that's weird. My bad. No, yeah, Elena Fisher, except for the blonde woman in the bar, But it's kind of a bit like it is a bit interesting.
Yeah.
That, like, she's such an important character in the game, and it's like, and her not being there, and instead only having Chloe. It is an interesting thing I felt to do.
It is incredibly strange that they decided to ignore the female love interest, like his future wife.
She's like literally the second character you're introduced when you first start playing the game.
Yeah, I mean they're both like love interests, but Chloe's like a side quest,
Yeah.
She was the woman that he served in the bar, like in the first 10 minutes or whatever.
I don't think Elena was a trust fund girl, so
it's one of those things where I feel like it's since she's not anywhere else in the game, that fact that she's specifically a blonde-haired woman about his age, you can almost go like, oh, was she supposed?
And Tom Holland doesn't talk to like that many strangers, so
yeah, exactly. So I'm almost like, I think even though she's completely different, or not completely, like pretty different, I think that was what they were going for, and so. Yeah. I don't know. I only thought about this after the fact, where I was like, wait, Elena wasn't in the movie. Was that supposed to be? Like that sort of thing. So it's like, so yeah. So I mean, again, in some ways, my critiques of the film are like a bunch of nitpicks because it's not a perfect adaptation of the game series so much. It's like, oh, Chloe isn't exactly like she isn't in the game, I feel like, and like, Nate isn't exactly who he is. So in some ways I'm being overly critical of the movie in a lot of ways here.
I will say, like, in positives, because I do have to praise it for a lot of things. The characters, they may have missed the mark, in my opinion. But I do really think they got a lot of like the stages and like the scenery. they did a great job.
Yeah.
And I remember again, like the intro where they're falling out of the plane and stuff. That's perfect. That's exactly what you would, be playing in the game. And I thought it was really faithful. And like, the crazy contraptions when they're going to find the map or whatever.
Mhm.
Like weird Roman antechamber, I guess.
The giant urns.
Yes, the giant urns full of salt. Those crazy contraptions and like this big, device, and like, Sully on the other side, doing his job while you do yours. I thought they got all that really great. The action
The production design was outstanding. It looked like, I haven't played the games, but it looked like a video game for a lot of the movie. Whether it was up in the air or in the islands, in the finale or the climax of the film, everything felt like you took a video game and made it really cinematic. And I think they did a really good job with the production design. Obviously, Ramin Djawadi's score amplified that. He's so talented, and this score is just the latest entry into his canon, his collection.
I would like to add that I picked Ramin Djawadi for my fantasy
So
draft.
we
for
all
our
remember.
films.
We're gonna do another one of those soon.
He was a great
Pick
pick
someone
by
else.
me. I was very proud of that.
Not saying that I am
Blah blah blah
friends
for the
with
next
him.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
Max Wisnett, blah blah blah. Yeah, no, it was great. But
Name dropping yourself, that's a new one.
yeah, no, I had a good time with the fantasy draft. It was fun. But I mean, I think it was, George, I think you're absolutely right that the film looked great. The sets were elaborate without being too overwhelming. Like it wasn't something that I would be like, oh, look at that thing in the background that I'm not supposed to look at. It was very clearly pared down to what me and the audience am supposed to be paying attention to and looking at. And it was elaborate when it needed to be. It was simple when it needed to be. And I think they hit the balance really, really well on that front. And obviously that might not be the same for the video game, but I think it just felt like it felt like a legitimate film that they were trying to do something really good. And for me, I think probably surpassed expectations, right? The trailers weren't anything that I thought were spectacular or special. And it's like, oh, like I'll go see it. It looks fun between Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland, but
The first line of the trailer wasn't in the film.
No.
You're a little too young to be a bartender. You're a little too old for prom.
I noticed that too. I was kind of disappointed about that. I wanted that line to be in there, but
That's a fun line. It's well written.
it's a great line. It was better than what they put in the film.
Yeah.
Their meeting,
I do
if they had
think,
played their meeting like they did in the trailer, I would have found it to be, oh, these guys actually have, some sort of rapport. They've got a little chemistry. The way they played it in the actual film felt like a letdown after seeing that trailer. I mean, we all go to the movies however often we do, very often. We see that trailer. We've been seeing that trailer for months. So
yeah, we only have a podcast about movies, so we don't go to the movie theaters that much.
No, we try to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, fuck movies, dude.
That's what
why
we're
are we even
unqualified.
here?
Yeah. We all just collectively shut down the place right now.
That's gonna do it for this episode. Bye.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, the production design was fantastic. The score was great. The performances mostly mixed. I think if the two leads had more chemistry, I would have found them to be a little bit more engaging. Sophia Ali couldn't decide whether she wanted a British accent or an Australian accent, and went back and forth a few times. I texted Max about that before he saw the movie.
It was like half and half.
That was the first time. That was the first thing he texted me afterwards. Was she couldn't pick an accent.
Yeah, it was like she really
And
did
she's an
go back
American
and forth.
actress.
Wait,
She's an
yeah.
American actress.
That's why it was so weird. I looked her up afterwards, and I was like, "Oh, she had to be one of the two."
Yeah.
Nope.
No,
I mean,
It's
this
like,
was
she's
like
fully American.
this was like
Whoa.
And just,
Hemsworth in the
like,
first Thor movie was just
Could
going
not
back and forth.
decide.
Wait,
Um,
I'm genuinely shocked by that. That's
Antonio Banderas. I want to talk about him for a minute here.
he did a great job.
I will
Yeah,
say,
he-
and obviously
Really
spoiler
died.
alert is in effect.
Oops.
Yeah, well, they clicked on the video, Max. I think they know we're going to talk
We're
about the
like
movie.
we're like 25 minutes and we're fine.
Yeah, I had a bunch of teenagers in my row at the theater, and the exact moment he had his throat slit, I was distracted, looking to my right when the teenagers were being obnoxious. So I am going to see this movie again
Mhm.
just to see that moment happen
just to see
on
his
the
throat
screen.
was-
It was
Okay.
literally, it was 2 seconds. I look away, I hear the noise, and then I look back and he's collapsing to the floor.
Oh,
Okay,
It's
but
like they
like
couldn't have timed it better.
okay, but like
But he gives
George,
a great performance to that point.
Yeah.
he does, and I understand where you're coming from, and that's something that I want to point out that is not specific to this movie, but has really been irritating me. Is that going to see movies in the theater since the pandemic has been one of the most frustrating things outside of like actual frustrating things for me to experience, because people I think have forgotten how to act in movie theaters. Like they don't shut up.
They think they're in the living room.
Like
Yeah.
I've been used to absolute silence until something exciting happens, right? You know, spoiler alerts for the next 30 seconds, probably more than that, but you know, No Way Home, right? You have Toby and Andrew and you know all this exciting shit happening.
Matt Murdock.
Matt Murdock, yeah. And you want it to be like, oh my God. But then you have people like talking about it throughout the movie. And it's like, okay, that ruins the experience. And the same thing happened to me when I was watching Uncharted, is that there's a group of, you know, probably my age, you know, 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds chatting behind me. And it wasn't like I could turn around and be like, hey, please be quiet, because we were in the tiered seating with really
Stadium
nice
seating?
seats. Yeah, it was stadium seating. So it's not like I could be like easily turn around and be like, hey, shh. I'd have to turn around and be like, hey, shh. And
That's when you gotta bring out the Adam Sandler. Shut up!
I'm using that for the thumbnail. I'm going to find this moment and use that for the thumbnail.
That's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, like that's something that I wanted to point out. It has nothing to do with this movie specifically and what I think about it, but just something I've been thinking about that has been really annoying for me is that I love movies, I love going to the theater, but this has been going on for a couple of months, and I'm like, I hate it.
Honestly,
I
valid.
absolutely hate it. I cannot stand
Yeah.
it when people in theaters. If I'm sitting in my living room and I'm talking to like a friend or a family member, yeah, let's talk about it. But you know, when I'm trying to like experience something for the first time and watch a movie like No Way Home or Uncharted
Matrix.
or The Matrix or Endgame or The Power of the Dog or something, if you know, if I saw that in theaters, I didn't see that in theaters, but there's so many things that I want to experience things for the first time organically, and I can't do that if people are just talking. And it's the worst thing ever.
I just want to hear Ben do his Adam Sandler impression again.
Yeah, do it again.
That was a
Do
pretty
it.
bad one. That was too high. Shut up! That was too low. Adam Sandler is not one of the impressions I can actually do.
It's okay.
All right, do Kevin James and just coach the New Orleans Saints. So yeah, Ben, Declan, what do you guys think about Banderas in this one?
I feel like I saw another review praise him, and it was a really good way they summed up his performance as like Banderas somehow feels like he embodies what an Uncharted villain is most of the time. Like he just sort of feels that like right in there. And yeah,
Was he an original character?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he
was,
is.
though. Yeah. Yeah. But it was. I felt like I liked his backstory. I felt like he did a good villainous performance. I feel like I haven't seen Antonio Banderas do like a serious villain performance in a long time. So I feel like that was fun. So yeah, I really enjoyed him in the movie for me personally.
Yeah, I will say they should have kept him. Like I don't know what like Joe Braddock or whatever. Her name was. Yeah. She's kind of a lame character because I think part of the thing that I miss in the like latter half of the movie is, yeah, sure, you're finding treasure and stuff, but you were missing some of like the historical like relevance and gravitas. Normally there's some connection, whether it's just people chasing treasure or whatever. Joe Braddock just sort of like seemed like she was just
villain for villain's sake.
Yeah, it's like, oh, money. But Antonio Banderas's character actually like felt like it had depth. It's
Moncada
like, oh,
had
yes,
a lot
I
of
deserve
dimensionality.
this money. Yeah, and it traced back to the history of the treasure, with his family and stuff.
Yeah,
I feel like that's the stuff they should have relied on. Because like otherwise it's just treasure, man. You can do that anytime. What made Indiana Jones was Indiana Jones.
And also this movie ripping off the red line plane flying across the earth. Completely ripped off from Raiders.
Okay, well, literally every treasure hunting
Indiana
movie
Jones movie
is going to rip off Indiana Jones. It'd be stupid not to.
If it was a crime to rip off Indiana Jones,
stupid not to.
It would be. I mean,
genre wouldn't exist.
Hey, I mean, you got Ryan Reynolds in Red Notice literally whistling the Indiana Jones theme, the Raiders march.
There you go.
But it was the first. I mean, Uncharted to me was always, it's a video game of Indiana Jones. It's like you're going to these crazy places, and later on you get into more mystical realms like Shambhala. So it does.
Where's that, Ohio?
Yes.
Yeah, Ohio. Exactly. Right around the Amish people. But there, yeah, like Indiana Jones is the template, so
it's the action adventure story.
You just have to.
Yeah.
But I mean, to Uncharted's credit, like again, why I'm mentioning the characters is they made unique characters. Like, yeah, oh, we're chasing treasure and stuff. But what really made it was the relationships and the rapport with each other. And I felt like that's the only thing they were lacking. I mean, they had everything else. If they could have cast better and maybe, I feel like they wrote it because they had Tom Holland. It didn't feel like the script they would have written if they had someone that could be a little older.
Who would you cast in that role? And I know the answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, Nathan Fillion like 10 years ago. Now he is too old. These days, it's kind of tough.
Charlie Hunnam.
What? Who was that?
Charlie Hunnam? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
He seems a little intense, though. I'm trying to think of someone just like whimsical,
Oh,
like
God.
everything Nathan Fillion does. That's the character you're looking for.
Ben
Based
Whishaw.
off of his performance in The Nice Guys, Ryan Reynolds. No, not Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, though. Could he do? I mean, I feel like he could do it. He's a good actor. Like he could definitely do it.
Stretch, but I feel like he could do a great job.
Yeah, I don't know if he would be quite what I'm looking for, but I think he would do a good job. And I think,
but how old are we looking? How old is Nathan Drake in the movie? In the
movie, he's 25.
25.
No, I know that.
30.
Sorry, I mean in the
Early.
Sorry, the problem is Tom Holland is 26, right? He just doesn't look 26.
and he looks like he's 15.
When they did the flashback to him as a boy, I was like, oh, what is this? Like 5 years ago?
Well, that's because they chose someone who looks like a very, very 16-year-old, 10-year-old.
Yes, that's what that is one thing I was thinking. I was like, oh my god, that's
That's
like
not what
the
10-year-olds look like.
The younger version of Nathan
I didn't look like
Drake
that when I was 10.
looks like he was 17.
Yeah, he
He looks like he could
didn't
play
really
Peter
age in
Parker
15
now.
years.
They're just gaslighting us on people's ages in this film.
Yeah. And I
Max,
don't know.
you were
Sully's
No.
character is like mysterious age. I don't know how old he's supposed to be.
this guy's either like 40 or 80. We don't even know how old he's supposed to be.
Exactly.
Max, we were doing a
Really
little fan casting before you joined the call here, and one idea that I had, George Grothier, the person who came up with the idea, since we're name
Film
dropping
school
ourselves,
buff.
I dropped Chris Pratt and John Slattery,
It
and
just seems old.
Declan said that might be the best movie making idea he's ever heard.
Hmm.
So I mean,
I
we're
do
just
like.
we're dropping we're thinking of options here.
Like, I mean, I get it, but like that, I mean, and obviously, like I said before, I don't know the ages, but that just seems so old.
Yeah, I'm one. I'll defer to the
Um,
two of you,
I-
whichever side of me you're on.
So
the recording.
my favorite casting for Sully would be like Bruce Campbell. Even now, even though he's sort of old. Because the thing is, Sully is old in the games. That gray hair. He's like sort of, he looks like Bruce Campbell. Like, I retired in Miami for a little bit. I smoke cigars. I drink, whatever. It works. So I really wanted someone older for Sully. Like Mark Wahlberg like Mark Wahlberg looks too young, even though he is sort of like 50 now or whatever. And Tom
He's, like,
Holland
kinda
looks
old.
Aging like a fine wine.
everybody just looks too young for their age. It's crazy.
Except Banderas, he looks flawless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
no,
really
he looks
did.
good.
He looks so good in that.
Does he look better? Does he look better than friend of the podcast, Michael Douglas? Would you say?
No,
Oof.
Yeah,
no, we can't install Michael Douglas like
yeah,
that.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
We haven't name dropped old Mike Douglas on the pod in a while. Hope
Well,
you're
we
doing
just
well,
did.
Mike.
We just did. So
Hey, yeah.
Mike, if you're watching, we miss you. Come on back to the show.
Yeah, come on back. Maybe we could
So,
cast Michael Douglas as Sully.
Ooh, hey, that's actually not a bad idea.
That would be pretty good.
Paul
Samuel
Rudd is
L.
Nathan Drake.
Samuel L. Jackson is Nathan Drake, and Michael Douglas as Sully.
All right, boys. Final thoughts on Uncharted. What do we got?
I enjoyed it overall. I can't complain that much.
Fair. As from a technical point of view, it is a good film, and I'll probably rewatch it again. I might even like it more. As a fan of the game, I felt a bit disappointed because I felt the characters could have been so much better given the material they were working with, and I felt there was a bit of miscasting going on for me.
Mhm.
I'll go. I think I probably liked it more than you two, but I think that purely comes from me not knowing the video games, but and not having that background. But I think you're right. Definitely room for improvement, and yet I would probably see this movie. I will definitely see the second one when it comes out, because not every film needs to be Oscar material. This
It was
is
fun.
definitely not one of those films where I was going in thinking, "Oh, this is gonna be like the best film ever." Like, no, I was going in thinking this will be an entertaining film, and I'll enjoy the story and have fun with the characters, and I absolutely did, even with the flaws that we talked about over the past, 45 minutes or so, 40 minutes. I think it was well done, and it absolutely left room for new stories, and I'm looking forward to it. So go see it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you should
Yeah.
go see it.
It's very entertaining, and I think that's the bottom line for an action adventure movie,
Mm-hmm.
independent of its source material, whatever it may be, a novel, a graphic novel, a video game, what have you. I think the primary purpose of an action adventure is to be thrilling and entertaining. And I think while this, as we've all said on these final thoughts, while this film admittedly has its flaws, it serves its own purpose of being sort of that film that it wants to be. So I liked it. I would see it again, if only for that one moment that I missed in the theater. Thanks, preteens. Said with such disdain. I would see a sequel. I'm excited to see where this franchise goes. I'm interested in the game now. I would play the game, having seen this movie. So that's going to do it for this Uncharted review from the Unqualified Film Bros podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, we will see you in the movies.
Good night.
Good night.